hope I'm audible to you all. I hope I'm audible. So I think we'll start with today's program. So namaste and good evening, everyone. Welcome to the second episode of the Wild and Life Seminar Series hosted by the Small Mammals Conservation and Research Foundation, SMCRF. And I'm Varsha Rai from SMCRF, the moderator for today's session. Wild and Life Seminar Series is a bi-monthly program hosted on Sundays that brings national and international researchers, conservationists, and scientists discussing their works in the field of biodiversity research and conservation and other biodiversity-related issues, including small mammals. The first episode of the Wild and Life Seminar Series was conducted on the 18th of July. So today we have Ms. Sabina Koirala, a PhD scholar at the Institute of Zoology, University of Chinese Academy of Sciences, Beijing, China, as a guest speaker. She's a master's graduate from the Central Department of Zoology, Tribhuvan University, Kathmandu, and has been working in the field of biodiversity research and conservation, especially macaques, ecology, and behavior since 2011. She's a recipient of Kastua's President's Fellowship for her PhD in ecology at the University of Chinese Academy of Sciences, Beijing, China, for the project related to crop breeding dynamics of rhesus macaque in Nepal. She is also an executive board member of Bird Conservation Nepal since 2015. She is involved with SMCRF since 2012 and is also SMCRF's former president. So now, without much further ado, I would like to welcome Ms. Sabina Koirala for her talk. The title of her talk will be Crop Breeding Behavior of Wild Rhesus Macaques, Ratu Badar in Nepal. Also, I would like to notify that the session is being recorded and will be posted on the official Facebook page of SMCRF and YouTube channel as well. And also, please feel free to drop your questions in the chat box, if any, and we will address them at the end of the presentation. So, if Ms. Sabina is ready, we can move ahead with the presentation. So over to you, Ms. Sabina. Sabina ji, you are muted.
Thank you, Varsha. I would like to start my presentation. So can you see on the screen?
Yes, yes, Sabina ji.
Good afternoon and namaste everyone. I'm Sabina Koirala and I hope that Varsha has well introduced myself, me. So I'd like to start my presentation on the topic crop breeding behavior of wildlife rhesus macaques in Nepal. So just a brief introduction about the primates found in Nepal. Generally, we have four different primate species, two types of langur, like you see in the picture, and two types of macaques. So one is rhesus macaque that we are going to discuss about it today. And here you can see a picture of rhesus macaque, and it has like two twin babies. This picture is taken in Balaju Park, nearby Nagarjun Forest. And this is the Macaca asamensis. We also say it as a Pohore Badar, and our government has considered it as a protected mammal species. So this is the only primate species that is protected by our government. So here, this map, you can see the rhesus macaque is distributed all over the Southeast Asia. These are the countries that we can find rhesus macaque. And besides that, in some part of the America, like that continent, like few years back, long time ago, some species were introduced in that area. So these species are also well habituated in that introduced area, but this is the native distribution of this species. So you also have noticed this rhesus macaque, the Rato Madar, is like habituated everywhere. You can see them in the temple area, in the roadside, in settlement area, and in the like farmland fields. Like so, these are very well habituated to different kind of habitat. Because of this, their well adaptation to human-dominated landscape and habitat, they are like very prone to conflict, and in very, let's say, like they are very much conflict associated primate species, not only in Nepal, but it's all over its distribution range. So in our country, we have seen a lot of news, like in our social medias and our news sites, that this macaque has been a problem for many villages and many farmers and in settlement areas like that. So, and our recently last year, our government have conducted some project, and they identified the rhesus macaque are now among the top 10 crop breeding species in our country. So for my PhD, I'm conducting research on crop breeding behavior of this species and how different spatial factors are influencing their crop breeding behavior, how their activity budget, habitat use, and feeding ecology is changed, or how they are adapted in human-dominated landscape, and how the assessment. I also assess the economic cost of crop breeding, because this is really done in this field. Generally, the economic cost assessment is done by the questionnaire survey, but in my research, I conducted the economic cost. I measured the economic cost by myself, and besides that, I'm also looking at the human-monkey interactions in the forest farm mosaic habitat, and besides that, how the human attitude and perceptions are there, how they are. I also measure that in case of rhesus macaque. So my study is mainly focused on Panoti municipality, Kabre Palanchok, and there is a group of monkey which I name as OM group, and that has 52 individuals. So this is I'd like to say, very typical group of rhesus monkey in terms of its home range, and which is generally conflict associated kind of group. Its habitat, its home range is in forest, agriculture land, human settlement, road and temple, and all the public places that they are well habituated in that place. And in my study area, there are also two conflict associated species that we know is barking deer and wild boar. In my study area, the economy of local people is principally based on agriculture. For today's talk, I would like to focus on one of my recently published research article. So I'll be just talking about this for the talk, and later we can have any other discussion if you like to have any discussion after my presentation. So in this research paper, we mainly discuss about different 5 research questions, and they are like, do rhesus macaque exhibit feeding preference and rate certain crops more certainly than others? And for this, we consider rice and maize as 2 major crops, because that was the in the season, these 2 crops were mainly cultivated in that area. So the second question was, do preventive actions taken by farmers effectively mitigate crop damage by rhesus macaques? And third question was, do forests, such as the spatial proximity of farm field to the forest edge, distance to roads and hill walking trails, distance to houses, and crop type affect the amount of crop damage by rhesus macaque? And the fourth question was, what is the economic cost to the farmers of the macaque crop breeding? Like I also discussed it about before. And at the end, I suggested some of the mitigation measures that we can put in the place to minimize human-monkey conflict in my study area. So here I'd like to little expand my research question. So um, I just we explored in the paper like how the crops in these farmlands are affected crop rating by in different areas of this farmland influenced by the distance to the road, and we also consider the walking trails as a road because the roads were not heavy, like not like only few vehicles that are running in the roads, and more human trails are active for the human for the local farmer to travel there. So we also consider for the major travel path of humans for as a road for this analysis, and we will consider how houses distance to houses from any farm field influence the crop rating, and after that how the distance to the forest influence the crop rating. And macaques generally have uh, they generally prefer like certain travel route. They have like major travel route and minor travel route to travel, which they prefer to walk to explore their home area. So we also consider the travel route, their travel route, as a factor to test for this crop rating influence on crop rating by the macaque species, and how the crop type rice and maize has influence on macaque crop rating that. And after that at the end we also explore like from this direct path generally macaque from this travel route generally macaque travel straight to the farmland and red crops during my study. So we just explored that how the land use land cover of this direct path influence the crop rating. So this is one of the another test we did in this art paper. And besides that, how the mitigation effort uh, by humans influence the crop rating. So for this, we categorize only two protective measures applied by local farmers there. First one is fully protected. That means farm owners, they guard their field from the early in the morning to the late evening for a whole day and protect their crops. So that we consider as a fully protected plots. And another is like they just put this kind of scarecrow and just sometimes just visited the field and check either macaques are there or not. So we generally doesn't influence macaque that much to stop crop raiding. So we also consider either this minimum protection as a unprotected plot because that didn't influence the macaque crop raiding in during our field visit. So we consider this minimal protection as a non-protected plot, and we checked either fully protection or minimal or no protection have any influence on macaque crop raiding or not. And at the end we calculated how this macaque crop raiding influence how much economic damage is done by the macaque crop raiding on maize and rice per household in the area. So for this, since February 2000 to August 2019, we have visited our study group using scan and all occurrence sampling. And we followed our group for 236 hours and we explored their home range, how much they are exploring in the area. And we also we also identified their major travel route, which way they travel and which area they explore and use as a food, use for the feeding and resting like that. So this is the study area we conducted the study. So this is the major route that macaque travel in the area, and we identified it's more than 7 kilometer, almost 7.5 kilometer as this travel route of the macaque. Excuse me, I just don't know. एकैछिन ल मेरो यहाँनिर स्लाइड के भयो. Let's see. So during our that habituation period, we also looked at how when macaque invaded in the farmland, we measured the during one invasion how much area they invaded. So during one invasion, the whole group invaded more than 380 meter square area during one invasion. That is the average size of the farmland they invaded. So considering that area, we randomly created 172 circular farmland plots in their home range, and uh, for that before we plotted these sample plots, we at first buffer this their travel route, and within that 300-meter buffer of this travel route, we randomly created more than 172 circular sample plots, and then we measured the crop damage. So during that 172 plots were cultivated with 103 maize plots were cultivated with maize, and 69 was cultivated with rice. And those each sample plots we visited 1 to 4 times before after the crop reading by macaque, and before the crop harvestment by the farmers. So each plot was visited for either 1 to 4 times during August to October, and for each sample plot we counted the total number of damaged plants. And after that we collected 60 not damaged rice plants and 16 not damaged maize corn, and weighted how much that one corn and one rice plant weight in their dry weight, so to know that how much monkey damage from one plant. So we collected these during the field work. And we also asked that 160 farmers who own our sample plots, and asked what the mitigation efforts they used. And besides that, we also interviewed 31 farmers to collect data on land owned and income from livestock to assess their damage and economic annual income from those two crops. So for our analysis, as mentioned in the research question, we consider distance to the forest, distance to the road and walking trails, homes, and major travel route of the macaques, and mitigation effort as the variables which might have influenced the crop rating. And we run a model to check the influence of these variables. And also for each of these direct path from this travel route to the farm plot, we also calculated the proportion, like how much this is direct path in each of these direct path, how much area is devoted to houses, how much area is devoted to forest, and how much area is devoted to rice or maize cultivation. So each of these for each of these direct path to the plots, we calculated this land use and land cover and then we analyze that. So what you get in the result is like macaques heavily showed the preference over maize compared to rice in our sample plots, which was more than 6 hectare totaling the area. Maize damage was more than 1,500, like it's 1,838 kg overall maize damage in our sample plots, and rice damage was only 1.7. So if we calculate it per hectare, maize damage was 469.6 kg per hectare, while rice was only damaged 0.6 kg per hectare. So, but in the area, the maize accounted for 62.1% of total crop produced and 99.8% of the crop damage by the macaque. So we can say that maize was heavily damaged, preferred by macaques compared to the rice. So these are our sample plots, and you can see the location of damaged and non-damaged sample plots. So what is the influence of mitigation effort that implemented by farmers on macaque crop damage? So actually those fully protected plots, only 16.3% of fully protected maize plots was damaged, while 69, almost 80% of unprotected maize plot was damaged by the monkey. So for this, we only we separated these maize and rice plots because maize was heavily preferred by macaques. And the average damage to unprotected maize plots were 31.3 kg, while it's only 3 kg for the protected plots. So the total damage was 145.8 kg for the protected plots, while it's more than 1600, almost 1700 kg for the unprotected plots. So the mitigation effort that farmers implement to stop the crop raiding is very much important to protect the crop, and it's like a very important thing for to think about implementing the implementing the mitigation efforts or any plan for the to mitigate the human monkey conflict. So in case of rice plots, only 11.3% of the unprotected rice plot was damaged, and non-protected rice plots was damaged. So average damage for pot plot was only 0.02 kg on average. So the next question, how these distances to forest and road and the crop type affected the amount of crop damage by rhesus macaque. So we can see in this graph that the closer the farm plot to the forest, the more damage, more maize damage is there. And the closer to the farm plots to the travel route, the more damage is there. So when the farm, in the site, when the field, the farmland is near to the 20-meter distance from the forest, it was more vulnerable to crop raiding by macaque. And while it's while the farm is, if the farm is near to the 100 meter, then it's more vulnerable to crop damage from this macaque travel route. And we also find that when in the direct, I'll show in this. So we also find that from this macaque travel route, when the macaque travel straightly to the farm plot, and if there are maize in this direct path, the damage is less in this plot. But if this direct path is cultivated with rice, or it has more proportion of house or forest, then there is no influence on maize damage in this plot. So we can say that the protection by many farmers in this area stop the crop damage of that particular area, particular plot. So it means we can say that when the farmers, they collectively protect their farm plots, then damage is less. So our result is mainly like distance to the roads and houses didn't have any influence on the macaque crop damage, while the crop type and mitigation effort has a strong influence on the macaque crop damage, and distance to travel route and forest also influence the macaque crop damage. And this one I already explained. So while we talk about cost to the farmers of macaque crop raiding, the average income from maize and rice farming per household in the area was 42,000 per household income, because the maize and rice is cultivated only once in the year. So annual income is this much. So macaque damage 24 rupees rice per hectare, while maize, they damage more maize, almost more than 16,000 per hectare. So looking at this data, we can say per household, by cultivating rice and maize, macaque damage 1,753 per household, and this is the 4.2% of their annual income by cultivating rice and maize. But who doesn't have any rice field, their damage is more, because macaque damage more rice. So for the one who doesn't have rice field, the damage is more than 10%. So looking at these results, we put forward some of the management implications. So here I would like to discuss about that. The first thing is we want to, we suggest to plant cash crops that are non-preferred or avoided by macaques within the 20 meter of the forest edge and within the 100 meter from the macaques' major travel route. And for that, to implement it effectively, we want to establish a local market there. We suggest to establish a local market there, because these are not like local farmers doesn't need these from these crops very much, and but they want rice and they want maize for their daily consumption. So if there is any market that can expand the offer instead of these cash crops to the maize which the farmers need to eat, so that would be more effective in our thought. So, and after that, some of the farmers has already converted their farmland to from maize farmland to rice farmland if the irrigation facility is available. So if the area, if the local government or in any area, it's not only in my field site, they can manage the irrigation facility, so they can plant cultivate rice. Farmers can cultivate rice instead of maize. Besides that, we recommend to organize a coordinated mitigation plan to several farmers sharing the responsibility of guarding each other's field from the macaques, because even like while we observe the macaques, we say like farmers just ignore the macaques when they are raiding other crops, and they just care about their own crops. And in the area when farmers are collectively and coordinately protecting their farm fields, then that time the protection is more effective and damage is very less. So education and awareness program is also needed for this. Now, for also needed to aware people that this coordinated mitigation plan is very important. And in our not only in our field, also in like different part of Nepal, we know that our native forest is very degraded, and we have planted like many monoculture forests like pine and generally the pine, so which is not a very good source for the not only for the monkey but for other wildlife. So we recommend to restore the natural forest and at least plant some of the food plant for the species like this we say Nepalese hawk palm, and this is Sima walichi, this Hade Boer, I don't know its common name, and this we say Chutroya, and this Gangaru and this Kalo Isulu, like these are the very good source of wild food for the monkeys. So these planting these plants in the forest is very important as alternate, not as a main source of the food for wild food. And we suggest that this kind of plants should be planted at least 150 meter far from the farm fields. And also trimming and rebranching taller tree and clear the ground cover to create a perimeter of at least 20 meters from the forest is, so that farmers who are protecting the fields, they can see the monkeys that they are approaching the field site, so they can just chase away them. So these kind of things are also important. And in our field site, generally farmers which have only like very less land, and that is also if they very closer to the forest, they are very vulnerable for the macaque damage, and they lost their large amount of annual income from the macaque crop damage. So livestock farming is, we recommend livestock farming is another best option in the area for generally for the smallholder farmers. So take home messages from this research work is like over past 10 years, macaque crop raiding in the Kabra Plains district in Nepal has gone from being absent to resulting in an average loss of annual income from maize and rice farming per household of approximately 4.2%. In the absence of effective mitigation measures designed to protect farmer income and macaque safety, farmer losses are likely to increase over the next decade, resulting in actions taken by the farmers to eradicate macaques from the region. And based on our analysis of human-monkey conflict, we recommend that wildlife managers and local government invest in community education programs designed to encourage farmers to protect farmland collectively, cultivate buffer crop in the vicinity of the forest stage, and actively engage in the worker paid program designed to restore natural forest and plant fruit trees and other natural vegetation to expand suitable habitat for the macaques. So I'd like to acknowledge the Panoti municipality and ward offices and its management staff for the support of during the field work, and also the farmer survey participants and local people for their support during data collection, and also my field assistants, my parents, family, friends, and this program was funded by the Strategic Priority Research Program of our university. Thank you. So we can have discussion if you have any questions and suggestions for this talk. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Sabina, for your presentation. So we are open for the questions. So if you have any questions, you can drop them in the chat box, and we will start taking them. Currently we don't have questions. Maybe we'll have them after some time. So I have one question for you, Ms. Sabina. So I was curious that how did you identify, or how did you make sure that the study group that you were following is the same study group all the time? They study group ho ki haina, that group of 52 monkeys. How did you identify them?
Actually, I was quite familiar with identifying monkeys because while I was working in Nagarjun forest, especially with Assamese macaque and even in the rhesus macaque in Balaji Park, we had identified like large group of monkey individually and named them one by one. So each monkeys have their own character, own facial structure, and during fight and other injuries, they have some scars and even some other by born scars and like that. So using that, we can identify which of individual is that. And so for my study group, I had identified more than 10 individuals. So when I see them, then I know that this is my group. And there was another group habituating nearby. So during that time, if I see the another group, then I also identified some of the individual from the next group. Then like we could identify when we really look at the monkeys, then they have different face like humans. So it's just like identifying humans. Yeah.
When you start working with them, you get to know, you know how to distinguish between two monkeys, like you do for humans.
Yes.
So we have one question coming from Mr. Dr. Dinesh Nyopane. He asks, I'm curious why this study did not cover fruit trees and even water sources for the factor analysis.
Actually, tree cover I didn't analyze for this study. I'm working on another paper for that, mainly for the habitat use kind of stuff. And as a water source, I don't know, it's just the homeland is very small and there is a big river crossing by that. So in the home range there is a big river crossing by that. So that is, I didn't think like it might have influence on that. So for that we didn't just consider about it.
Okay, any questions? If you have any questions, please drop them in the chat box. We'll take them from there. So meanwhile, I also want to ask one question. So amidst this human-monkey conflict, are farmers, the locals, willing to protect monkeys and take suitable steps to protect their crops without harming them? Are they like positive about not harming monkeys at the same time and protecting their crops?
Yeah, we have conducted some questionnaire survey, like how they like to conserve and manage and think about management approaches. But I haven't analyzed that, but I think they are not willing to kill. Most of they want to be translocated in another area, but which we don't think is a good option, because translocation is very cost effective and it's also, yeah, it's very time taking and cost effective. And another thing is we don't have any good habitat or large area forest that is suitable for translocating a group of monkey. And now, while we look at the conservation, that management practices on these management practices adopted in India, then that is not that much successful, because sooner or later in the another area where the monkey is translocated, they starts being in conflict with humans again. So translocation is not a very suitable option. So but the local people want them want to be translocated, which is not that much possible. And as we see, like we think that the damage is more even like because like we read the news and that damage is very high and like that. So but that data show the damage is very just like less than 5% in average. So we can so that's why we suggested those kind of mitigation effort that is cost effective, and it is useful for managing the even like conserving macaques and managing the habitat conflict at the same time. So those recommendations were presented or suggested actually.
Okay. So there is one more question. Does monkey cause human casualty too? Is there any incident of, have you heard or observed of any incident that has caused human casualty as well from the monkeys?
No, not that. Was just like there are some like macaques generally don't just attack humans, but while protecting their infants, or while they feel that they are threatened by humans, and if they don't find a way to run, then they can counterattack humans. But generally, they are not that much aggressive to kill or to attack human by approach by themselves. But for the dogs, when the dog um, try to protect their crops and try to protect their owner's crop, then that time monkey, like whole group of monkey, they attack the dog, and dog is killed during my study. So that kind of things happen, but there is no human casualty.
Oh, okay. So we have another question coming in from Dr. Dinesh Napane. He asks, are these monkeys residents in the area or translocated from other area? Even how people used to take money in the past, like feeding in temple or even in the forest while rearing cattle. I think you can also see the question there in the chat box from Dinesh Napane.
Yeah, people think that the monkeys are translocated from the another area. Everywhere we listen that, because people just think that they are translocated. But in my experience, there is no any monkey translocation conducted by any of like a temple management like Pashupatinath, like that, because generally people think from Pashupatinath monkey is being translocated in that area. And so I also consulted with Dr. Mukesh Kumar Chalise and with some of the forest officers and asked about that, like if is there any possibility like that. Then all answer I get is no, because there is no any translocation is happening happening like that. So in my study area, just nearby my field site, there is another group of monkey which they're like since long, like since 10 20 years ago, I think more than 50 years ago, like that, they were there already. So when the macaque population they increase their size, and they slowly form a separate group, and if they find a good habitat nearby, they just move to new habitat by themselves. So even during my field site, macaque approached a new area, and when I was going to the new area, and local people thought that I bring the monkey there, because I was following the monkey, and they thought that I was the one who translocated monkey from another area to this. I was threatened by the local people, because they were unaware that monkey has gone by themselves just from the nearby forest path. So monkeys were just before, they were just in the near area, and now they are translocated. Now they are slowly shifting their range, forming another group and shifting their range. Just that.
Okay, so we have another question from Mr. Divya Dahal. He says, what is your personal suggestion regarding on Badar Dhapaune Yantra? It is distributing in different parts of Nepal. Badar Dhapaune Yantra, what do you have to say about this?
I think those that what like we think like that बन्दुकवाला हैन, अब मलाई चाहिँ के लाग्छ त्यो सब कुराहरू एउटा सर्ट टर्मको लागि मात्रै प्र्याक्टिकेबल हुन्छ, किनभने दे हेभ भेरी गुड लर्निङ स्किल हैन, एकदम छिटो छिटो कुराहरू उनीहरूले सिकिहाल्छ। त्यही हुनाले त्यो जस्तो सुकै यन्त्रहरू बनाओस्, उनीहरू चाहिँ लर्निङ क्यापेसिटी एकदम धेरै हुन्छ मकाकमा। सो that is like very short term, I think, and we need to think about different multiple management strategies at the same time, that can be like habitat management and education programs to the local to plant alternative crops and finding out alternative crops, and planting this food plant in the wild for the targeting the monkeys and other wildlife which are causing conflict. So we have to think about multiple management approaches and implement at the same time. So there, I don't think there is like any particular kind of thing that is that can be helpful to minimize or solve the conflict scenarios. I think that.
So I was curious. While I've read your paper that this presentation is based on. So त्यहाँ के लेखेको थियो भने that crops like maize are have high protein in them. So when monkeys feed on them, their fertility increases, and thus their population also increases drastically. So यसको लागि चाहिँ has Nepal tried to neuter monkeys, like so that they don't breed like they do these days when they raid crops like maize? Neuter गर्ने चाहिँ गरिएको छ कि छैन बाँदरलाई भनेर?
छैन त्यस्तो भन्नाले अहिलेसम्म त्यस्तो केही गराएको छैन. That's why the population is increasing. One thing is like they are feeding on crop, and so on the temple sites we can find like twins or maybe triplets because they have good food there. And when they feed on crops, and when they have good food available, then generally they breed on like twice a year. But when they have good food like crop and other kind of thing, then they give child once a year. So that's why the population is increasing more.
Okay, so do you think that neutering animals like that is effective to control their population, and thus prevent human wildlife conflict? Do you think it is effective?
I think that is one thing that we have to think about. I think because the population is increasing, so this controlling population is also another aspect that we have to think about for the long-term management of human monkey conflict. So yeah, I think that can be one possible option, but that is also very much that needs very skilled persons and a lot of money for that. Not that cost effective. So that's why for our study site where the annual damage is only less than 5% from the farmer for the farmer's income. So that's translocation very cost effective. That's why we didn't recommend that. But for other area that should be like we need to think about those kind of approaches to reduce the population of monkey.
Okay, so if you have any questions, please add them in the chat box, and we'll read it for Miss Sabina. So do monkeys only raid crops to eat, or they also do it out of mischief? Do they raid only to eat those crops, or they just hang over there?
There are different theories about crop foraging by the wildlife, not only the primates. So those theories are like, one says like they just prefer crop to eat, and another says like they just want as a fallback food because there is no food availability in the wild. And some say that they might want to taste new food, and that is also an obvious thing because macaques are very intelligent, and they obviously want to try out the new food available there. And the thing is, once they find out that those crops are very highly nutritious, and it's like if we just steal that and eat for a while, then that is very helpful. Like they don't have to forage for a long time for the wild food, and they can just have more time to rest and play or groom each other and have like pleasure time. So they just want to take risk and steal the food and raid the crop and in spite of risks, and they just want to have good resting and like that. So they are kind of lazy in going back to the wild and searching food. So this kind of thing is mainly responsible. So once they find out crop is good, then they don't want to go back and search for the wild food again.
Okay, so one more thing I read in your paper was that you were suggesting about like planting crops like chilies that they don't like, planting chilies in the periphery of your cropland so that it can drive those macaques away. So do you think that they won't learn that this is just a technique, just a tactics to drive them away? Do you think it will help them in the help the farmers in the long term to drive those macaques away from the area?
Obviously, it doesn't help. That's why it is just an option. So I'm saying that all the approaches have to be implemented at the same time. So just planting chilies and living as it is doesn't help. obviously macaque also eat chilies, but they just don't prefer it. So if they find there is no maize or like there is no pumpkins and like that, they just start eating chilies. So it's like it is recommended that they plant buffer crop as chili or other like garlic and like that, but farmers have to stay nearby, protect their maize field and like that, so that macaque doesn't come to the maize field and they can chase away the monkey when they are on the periphery. So they can just detect and chase. So that is very important thing. We just can't plant chili and leave them. So they will obviously eat that. Not only chilies, I think they can adapt any other thing. So not like in my case, the rice is not damaged by a monkey in that history site, but in Nepal, we know that we have been reading news and some either in some other research articles that they have mentioned that macaque eat lot of rice. So when there is no maize, then they eat rice also. Just in that study site, macaque doesn't eat rice. So it doesn't mean that macaque doesn't eat rice. So just in that site, these things are very much site specific and very much so. So when we plan, when you think about and think about implementing this management plans, then it has to be very local target that we have to find out the, like we have to do research and understand local people's perception and everything. Then only we can figure out what is the suitable approach in that particular locality. It can't be general.
So that means macaques are very adaptive. They can adapt to any environment. They can eat whatever they find in the surrounding.
Yeah, if they think that is nutritious, then obviously they start eating that.
So we can conclude from this is that not one. I mean, only one kind of strategy is not cannot be applied to just chase macaques away and conserve them. That means that many strategies are to be implemented at the same time. Then only it can work. I think we can conclude it in this way. So if anyone has any more questions, you can post them here. So if you want to say something, then you can also unmute yourself and ask Miss Sabina yourself as well, if you don't want to post them in the chat box. So okay, maybe we are done with the questions. So thank you so much, Miss Sabina, for your fruitful presentation today. I also I had the opportunity to read your paper as well. It was really comprehensive and very nice. The strategies used, the methods used, there were very comprehensive, and everybody could really understand that. So maybe we have one more question here from Mr. Samyak Prajapati. He asks, crops may have higher calorific value than wild fruits and berries. So could the species still enter back to the farms, since the food there is easier to gain, is plentiful, and also requires less energy? Can these macaques change their behavior? Like they're having maize right now, and if we plant berries in the wild again, is it not possible that they will return to the maize field again, even if they have berries in the forest available for them?
They will obviously target maize specifically, because that is very large size maize corn, and if they grab one maize, and if they can take it back to the forest and eat relaxedly, they don't have to be on the rigs all the time. So so that is just a strategy that might reduce the conflict. So that planting berries and wild food is not a complete way out to manage human monkey conflict, but that is just a plan, and so that monkey also know that okay, wild plants also are there, so there is also food. So when human chase, they can be back to the field and eat that. Otherwise, like if human chase from one area and they can move to the another area, another area, so they will be moving around for the food because there is no food on the wild. But if there is food in the wild, they have an option, so they will explore that, but it won't obviously suddenly reduce all the possibilities of crop raiding.
Maybe it can just make this problem a little lesser. If you have berries in the wild, they will come less often to raid crops like maize. Maybe it can help in that sense. So I was very amazed that how did you keep up with those macaque groups, because they are continuously on the go. They do not rest at the same place for a very long time. How did you keep up with them? How did you find them again in your travel route? How did you find that they are in at this place at this time? How did you do that?
Yeah, it's very challenging that once we find out the monkey, we have to continuously follow that so that we don't miss them. Or like if we miss them, then it's very difficult to follow catch them again. So it's the best strategy is once we find out the monkey, then we observe them all day, and we like when they have a night settlement site, when they go back for the night settlement, then we know that okay, this is the place where monkey is resting for this whole night. So tomorrow early in the morning before monkey leaves that area, we have to be on that area so that we got them again like this. But if we miss it, then we may have to search for all the places, and in that place like that is human dominated places, so we can ask farmers that where they are. So sometimes they say okay, monkeys are there, but all the information are not reliable, because people, like when they say monkey yesterday in one place, they suggest okay, monkey is in that place, but that actually they have seen yesterday, but they haven't seen for today, but they just tell that okay, monkeys are there. But we have to be tricky, okay, that's like that. So but during some time we have to just search for it like for a week, because we don't find them and like this, and so it needs a lot of effort to like follow them and watch them all them continuously. It's not that.
Okay. So is that the only group that stays there in that area, or are there other monkey
There
groups
is
as well?
nearby another group. I mentioned it before. There is nearby another group. Sometime the two groups, they come together and they fight like that. So there is another group also. But during that my study time, another group didn't come there. So during other time, like they can come there like this.
So how did you know that the damage done by the monkeys was done by the same group that you were studying? How did you know that?
That's why I was very like concerned about either another group invaded that area or not during that time. So during the data collection period, the another group of monkey never approached that area. So that's why we confirmed. So yeah, we know that another group is there, and and we also follow our study group. So at that time we know that another group has approached that area or not like this.
Okay. That's very impressive.
Yeah.
One. So if you have any questions, this is the last chance. You can drop them here in the chat box. Otherwise, we'll go ahead with our last session for now. So okay, that's it maybe. So thank you so much, Ms. Sabina ji, for your presentation today. So now I would like to request Dr. Dinesh Neopane, from Resources Himalaya Foundation, who has been involved in elephant-human conflict for a very long time. And he's here to provide his concluding remarks on today's presentation. And he'll be shedding some light on his experience with human-wildlife conflict as well. And I hope Ms. Sabina will be here till the end of this session. Thank you so much, Ms. Sabina. And so I would like to request Dr. Dinesh Neopane for his concluding remarks. Over to you, Dr. Dinesh Neopane.
Thank you, Barsha. And thank you, Sabina, for the nice presentation. I really like the topic because, it is the topic that everybody ignores for the long-term research. We always think about the human, monkey conflict, but we don't have like the in-depth study on the human-monkey conflict in Nepal. And I really praise you for choosing this topic for your PhD. The monkey conflict is one of the serious problem in Nepal, especially in the rural part and the suburb area in Nepal. Usually, it is associated with our culture, the Hindu's culture and the Buddhist culture. That is why the human monkey conflict is increasing these days, because we usually like to feed monkeys in the temple. When we go to the temple, we like to feed them, and that behavior like attracts monkey to our home yard, but we don't care about that. These things when we feed the monkey. I really enjoyed the talk, and the congratulations for the paper that you published. And then the topic that you give a talk today covers various aspects, starting from the basic info about the tiger, the monkey. I don't know why tiger came in my mind. Uh, then distribution and the issues associated with the monkey in Nepal. Your presentation basically focused on the 5 research questions that everybody wants to hear, about when we talk about the monkey conflict. Hope this research would find a more fruitful, outcome in near future. I would like to stress one thing in the presentation that I'm worried about. When we talk about the economic evaluation, we always think about we have to be cautious about asking the questions regarding the economic damage, because people's behavior is like this. They usually they raise the amount that
Hello, Dr. Dinesh. Hello.
Yeah, he has joined back. I think now there are one more participant. Yeah, he's there.
Okay.
Yeah, I think he's back.
hello.
Yes. Welcome, Dr. Dinesh.
I was hearing you. I don't know what happened. I don't know.
Yeah.
It didn't happen these things. So regarding the economic evaluation, we have to be cautious because people raise the amount that actually happened, and then uh, but you have like some field-based assessment that is good to know. Uh, and the study, usually we think about the direct cost that happened from the conflict, the crop damage and the property damage. But there are indirect costs that happened due to the conflict, such as the amount of time that people used to, hold for the the monkey away from the farmland or the property, and also the measures that people are adopting uh, to chase the animal away from the farmland. So these are the other costs that we have to bear so that we can get the actual economic assessment or economic valuation of the damage. Uh, I already asked the questions, but I was still curious about the fruit crops that and the vegetables that you haven't covered in the study, because these are the crops or the grains that the monkey likes to feed. I was involved in a monkey conflict study in the Chal area, and that I found that the monkey usually prefer to feed vegetables and the fruits, and this is sometimes associated with our community forestry priorities that usually target for the timber production rather than the planting the fruit trees in the forest. And मैले त कहिलेकाहीँ कसरी एस्टेट पनि गर्छु भने लियोपर्ड कन्फ्लिक्ट र मङ्की कन्फ्लिक्ट इज एस्टेटेड somehow because in the mid hills in the recent time period we have heard about the leopard conflict and the monkey conflict in the same time, and then these are prey predator relationship, but the preyलाई फुड्नै छैन कम्युनिटी फरेस्टमा भने they used to go to the crop field, and then in the same time the predator follow the prey, and then that happened that happened with the human leopard conflict. This is my just hypothesis, but we have to do the study for the things, but this is my just thought. uh, and then that about the water also, sometimes water dictate the wildlife movement, particularly the herbivores and the fruit loving the animals. And uh, But you basically focus many aspects of the monkey conflict, and I hope this study and your PhD will give some foundation for the monkey conflict mitigation in Nepal, and some suggestion for the measures that we have to adopt for the conflict mitigation. I wish good luck for your PhD and more productive research in near future. Thank you. And at last, I would like to thank SMCRF for this program. And then I was, successful, success of this program in the future, because it's the second episode, and then I like to hear more about this, many talks in the program. So with this, I would like to conclude my remarks, and thank you all, and then stay safe, everyone. Namaste.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dinesh Nepane, for your wonderful concluding remarks today. And thank you so much for also joining us, for giving your remarks within such a short notice. Thank you so much having your time. And we would also like to notify everyone that we have a third episode of this Wild and Life seminar series on August 15, also on Sunday at 4 p.m. at the same time. And we'll notify all of you regarding this from our official Facebook page of Small Mammals Conservation Research Foundation. And you can find the video of today's episode from our official Facebook page as well, and the YouTube channel as well. Please follow and subscribe us there as well, and you'll be able to hear this recording again if you were not able to join this session till the very end of today's session. So thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much, Ms. Sabina Koirala, for your time and for your such a fruitful presentation for today. And thank you so much, Dr. Dinesh Nepane, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you so much. See you everyone on August 15 on Sunday at 4 p.m. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And
thank you,
Dr. Dinesh, for
thank you so much. Okay, bye.
Bye.